All right, everyone, we're gonna talk about the deadlift. So let's go over the basic progression that we're gonna use. First thing, go over stance. Talking about a stance that's kind of between the shoulder width stance and the hip width stance. That's gonna vary from athlete to athlete, but we first talk about stance. We then look at foot position. So the foot angle that we go through, whether it's a slightly straighter foot or slightly turned out. So we go stance, then foot position. From then, we go the knees. The knees are a hinge joint again. We want the knee staying tracking over the toe. Now, once we find those knees, we then have to talk about grip. So we put the bar down in the middle of the shin. We've got the knees pushing out. We take a grip that accommodates those knees. So wide enough to accommodate those knees while matching those other points. Stand on up. After we accommodate the knees with that grip, we then talk about a relatively vertical shin. So that's gonna help for our initial pull. So he goes down to the bottom. And we look down at the shin and we make sure it's a relatively vertical piece. He's got some long old shins there, so they're a little bit less vertical, but we're looking at a relatively vertical shin, and you can make that more or less depending on the anatomy of the athlete. Go ahead and stand on up. From there, what we go ahead and do is we talk about an active shoulder. And in this case, the active shoulder is resisting the load being pulled down and away. So the generally way we do this is make sure the bar doesn't drift away from him. Go ahead and go down. How we're gonna do that, a little pull away, making sure he maintains an active shoulder. Go ahead and stand on up. From there, we talk about how to actually lift. Well, before we do that, we talk about the spinal position during this. Now, Jason here is a bit kyphotic. He's got a mid-back.
That hurts.
I know, it is, but he's got
but literally my back hurts.
Yeah, literally his back hurts. He's got a bit of a rounded mid-back, so you're gonna see some weird stuff. It's mid to upper back, so he can go down to the bottom. So right through here, he's got these giant kind of upper erector things, and it's a little bit rounded, but it's not terrible. For some other people, it'll be a bit flatter. These might just be solid rock muscles. But we're gonna talk about a neutral spine and maintaining this the entire time. This is the next piece of the progression. Go ahead and stand on back up. If you were wondering what you're seeing, that's what it was, his giant erectors. From there, we talk about how to get it past the knee. And the two things we're gonna look at are knees going back and chest going up at the same time. So we're talking about the bar path. So as he stands up, maintaining that back angle and passing. Once we've got to that point, it's just then talking about the descent, which is sending the hips back, sliding it down to the top of the knee, and then dropping down in the middle of the shin. If we're gonna wrap it all up, first we talk about stance, then we talk about foot position, then we talk about the knee, then we talk about the grip on the outside of that, then we talk about the shin angle, then we talk about keeping an active shoulder, and then the bar path past the knee, and then the descent. First thing we have in the progression is that stance. Now, our stance, like we said before, is going to be between our jumping stance and our landing stance. And this is going to be dependent upon the anatomy of the athlete. So depending on how long their legs are, how long the legs in relation to the torso are, so not just the length of the legs, but it's more like the overall anatomy, how long the shins are in relation to the femur. Lots of stuff are going on here, but a good general stance is you get them to their jumping stance, have them take a slightly wider stance there. So your eyes go to the feet, you kind of look at the overall position, and you might actually have to adjust them a few times throughout their setups to see if this is the right position for them. And the way you do that is you then move on in the progression. So you're like, that looks pretty close to that place for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and take the bar down to the middle of the shin. And then we look at the foot position and we go, okay, foot position, we want relatively straight or slightly toed out. He's got his left foot a little turned in. Can you turn that? Yeah, there we go, good. And go ahead and stand on up. So with the foot position in the deadlift, you can actually have a slightly straighter toe because you're not going at a full flexion of the hip like you would in an air squat. So you can get a little bit more torque from the hips if you have a straighter foot, and because you're not going all the way at the flex, you can actually have a slightly straighter toe here. But you can also turn out just a little bit, and for some people that is appropriate. So our eyes go on that feet, making sure our toe position is not way turned in or way turned out. From there, we go down to the middle of the shin. Take it to like right here. Put some plates there. Good, cool. And then we look at making sure the knees tracking the toe. Oddly enough, we'll have people get to this position and be lazy with the knees, and they'll let the knees cave. So your eyes have to, they'll get down, they'll be like, is this my deadlift? And you're like, no, man. Go ahead and stand on back up. I usually like to make a joke because usually when you're teaching the deadlifts, it's a little bit longer into their learning career, and you'll say, hey, at what point in time in our sessions do we let the knee really cave in? And they'll be like, and it'll be like, trick question, never. So please push your knee out. And then there'll be this big driving of the knee out. So they get down to that bottom position. We make sure the knees lift pushing out. The only place that this can go wrong is if they push their knees too far out, and that's extreme. And he's actually really flexing through that ankle. Usually when people push their knees that far out, their feet will start to lift. So they'll start to go out and that feet will start to lift up. We don't want that. We want something a little bit more moderate than that. Yeah, go ahead and stand. The next thing that we want to look at after we look at that knee angle and making sure that's good, full foot's on the ground, we're grabbing our toes to the ground and creating a nice arch in the foot, is making sure that the grip accommodates the knees. So the grip we didn't go over until now, because when we go down to the bottom, we get all this other setup going, we push the knees out, we want to make sure that the grip's not getting in the way of the knees, which might mean they need to take either a narrower stance or a wider grip. And that's dependent upon the athlete that you're working with. And that's the two ways that you can start to begin to accommodate these knees, is that slightly narrower stance or that slightly wider grip, or a combination of the two. Go ahead and stand. And that's a time as a coach where you might be there and be like, that first stance I put them in, it's not quite there, go a little narrower, or widen your grip up. Whatever it is, you get to make those adjustments, hence the reason we do a progression. So then you get them down there, they got that nice wide grip, or the grip that's gonna accommodate the knees. The stance is looking good, eyes are all going here. Now we have to talk about an active shoulder. And the active shoulder, my favorite thing to do for this is just to understand, try to pull it away and get in here and force them to use their lat to pull it into their body. Go ahead and stand. When people are learning to deadlift, they should be scraping their knees, their shins up to some degree, because they're imprecise with how they can keep that. Once people become more proficient, then it's easier to keep it tight and not actually scrape up your body. But you should lose some skin when you're first learning here. And we'd rather have that than the bar drifting away from your body. Oftentimes people make this artificial, and they'll come down and they'll tap in here and be like, pinch this back, and that's just not a real thing. We just want to, we want to avoid being pulled out of position. And the way we do that is kind of come in, give a little handle there. The one thing I would say with that cue is, if you're doing this, don't leave your hand here. So as they stand up, because then you're going to touch their genitals, and that becomes weird for everybody involved.
Rule number 2 of coaching, don't be creepy.
Yeah, rule number 2 of coaching was don't be creepy. So avoid that one at all costs. But get them to understand that pull it in tight to the body. The tactile is really good. You could also just say, hey, bend the bar around your shins. That's a verbal cue for doing the same thing. After we get that nice active shoulder, we now need to talk about the last piece before we lift, which is making sure that the back is nice and rigid before we go. And how we do that is flexing our abs against our erectors to prevent the spine from rounding. So we have to say, hey, I want you to brace like you're going to be hit. Make sure that's happening in the very bottom position. And you can also even think about extending through the chest if you can. So go ahead and get down to the bottom. And you think about, hey, make sure you're braced through there, and then lifting the chest up nice and tight. And it should be uncomfortably so. And we talked about this before, but Jason's got a little bit of kyphosis through his mid back here. So it's a little bit rounded naturally. Go ahead and stand. And it gets exacerbated when he gets down to that bottom position. But for some people, that'll be extra flat. For some people, there might be a little hunch there. Did you go to Notre Dame? No, there was a Hunchback of Notre Dame joke in there. I thought this symbol was, isn't that the Notre Dame symbol?
I do remember when Navy beat Notre Dame, though.
Navy beat, okay, there it is.
One
okay,
time
I was
in the past
just
40 years, but whatever.
You ring some bells.
It's not a sore spot, but.
So just watch that. You got to get that back nice and flat, and we got to get that flat before we lift. Occasionally, you can see somebody overextend, where they're like pop it way out. Ideally, that doesn't happen. But if that's the case, have them flex those abs harder, because when you're flexing your abs, you can't, unless you let go of the abs, you can't keep turning the hips over. So we got to get that flat back before they lift. Then we talk about the actual line of action, how they get it off the ground. And my thought process for this is I want them to think about pushing their knees back and lifting their chest, not one or the other. It's just to drive the knees back, lift the chest, drive the knees back, lift the chest, and then stop above the knees. So they go down to the bottom, they get all those other points, and then you say, okay, when I say stand, I want you to push your knees back and lift your chest at the same time. And stand, grab your knees back, lift the chest, stop. And you have them stop right above the knee. Now here, a lot of people will still have their knees way bent, and you'll be like, push your knees back, push your knees back, push your knees back, right there. That's where I want you to get to, okay? And now stand all the way up. So from here, we have to talk about the descent. The descent, we'll just have them start nice and tall, chest tall. In this position, just think push the butt back towards the back wall, slide it down to the top of the knee and stop. And be like, do you recognize this position? This is where you just were. From here, just drop straight down to the bottom of that deadlift. Cool. Go ahead and stand and relax. There's actually a lot of coaches who teach from the top down. They just teach the deadlift from the top down because it's a really easy way to get someone set into that position and be like, okay, now let's find this. I personally have a much easier time, not easier time, I find more long-term success from teaching it from the bottom up because that's how you deadlift. You don't walk up to a heavy load and go, let me grab it at the top here, set myself and go down. And if you can communicate it through the process I just said, then they have a really easy time lowering it and they maintain that a bit better.
The other thing that'll happen if you teach from the top down, practically speaking, is what the coach will typically lack in that teaching session is enough reps in the setup. So when you start from the bottom up, you get way more reps in the setup to see hip height, shoulder relationship to the bar. Not that teaching from the top down is a bad thing. You should know how to do both. But what I typically see is when they teach from the top down, we get way fewer reps in the setup, and we know that most things, if they're wrong in the setup, will affect everything else moving forward.
Totally. That's a good thing. I actually never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's another reason that we would really want to make sure. I like personally teaching from the bottom up, because then when you teach the bottom down or the top down, you get them set to that position and they're like, oh, and then everything else they were doing before like clicks, and they're like, ah, that's a great way to do it, which is right there. From there, you have to just revisit back with your eye that line of action, because we only went over it once before we kind of addressed the top, because they got there. So since they were there, we might as well teach that descent. But then you say, hey, we're not going to stop now at the top of the knee. We're just going to have you be lifting. And then you go back and you stand from the side and you go back to making sure that their knees are going back and their chest is going up at the same time. Now, how this usually goes wrong is people will either rip just their chest up and go out and around the knee, in which case you'll give a cue like, hey, push the knees back and out of the way as you stand. Or they'll get a little dancery with it and they'll shoot their hips and then rip it all the way up. In which case you say, hey, lead with your chest a little bit more, and usually swinging on either sides of that pendulum will get them somewhere in between. But you do that after you teach the descent, because then you can get a few reps where they're moving through the full movement and your eyes are going to, hey, how's that bar navigating the knee with all of the other stuff being correct? Now you're still looking at all those other points that you taught, but then you can focus on the dynamic portion of the movement and really cue to that place. That's our progression for the dead. Good luck.
All right, Brian, what we're gonna do today is we're gonna learn to deadlift, okay? We're not gonna overteach this. I'm gonna show you what a deadlift looks like, so just watch these first 2 reps. Okay, so I wanna talk feet and hands first. So let's talk about your feet. Your feet are gonna be something between hip width and shoulder width, so go ahead and find what you think is pretty comfortable. I'm perfectly happy with that. Our hands, we're gonna go double overhand for today. So I want you to start about 1 thumb's distance outside the thighs, and then go ahead and wrap your hands around the bar. Beautiful. We're gonna make this setup here very, very simple. So all I really want you to think about is you're just gonna bend over, you're gonna put about that barbell about maybe a third, maybe a half the way up your shin, and you're just gonna push your knees forward until your eyes and your chest are facing out that roll-up door. So again, just bend over, put that barbell, don't even think about deadlifting. Yeah, and then just push your knees forward until your eyes and chest are facing forward, and then hold that position right there. Good. From there, holding on to that, all I want you to do is as you stand up, keep that bar as close to your shins as possible. Not bad. Okay, so that's the deadlift. I don't want to overthink the setup. There's a lot going on here, which we're going to start getting into, but I do want to make this setup fairly simple. So put it at mid shin, push your knees forward until your eyes and chest are facing forward, and then we'll just stand up from there. Okay, so now what I want you to think about is with regard to your feet. Okay, so we don't really do anything athletic with our toes up off of the floor. Chances are if you do, you're not very good at it. So I want the toes down on the floor. So think about driving your heel down and grabbing the floor with your big toe at the same time. Cool? That's what we're doing with the feet. For midline, or keeping myself in a safe position when I pick things up off the floor, I always tell people to like pat your belly and growl like a bear, like that. Yep, that's what I want you holding. That's midline stabilization. That's what I want you doing as you're moving, whether we're squatting, pressing overhead, or pulling something off the floor, okay? Now, go ahead and get into your setup position that we just went over. Again, keep it nice and simple, good. So what I want you to do is press that bar back towards your shin. It doesn't have to be super aggressive, but I do want you to think, if you were gonna shave your legs with a razor, that's the kind of pressure I want back towards your shin as you stand up. Don't move just yet. Don't put too much weight back towards the back of your foot. I want you to pin that big toe down towards the floor. Yep, there you go. And from there, just go ahead and stand up. not bad. So from here, we're gonna work our way down. So you're gonna go down towards the floor. So I want you to stop right about top of the knee, and then I'll tell you to hang out there for just a second. And back down, stop right there, good? Good. What I want you to do is I want you to pull the knees back just a little bit. So that's where I want you on the way down and on the way up. So go back to mid-shin. Good, same thing, eyes forward. Grab that floor with your big toe. There you go, that's what I want. So you see how your weight shifts forward just a little bit? I do want some weight at the middle of the foot or the ball of the foot. And deadlift, not bad. So I want you to slow down just a little bit. So as you're coming past the knee, the bars has a little bit of distance away from your body. I want you to think about keeping it close to your body or in contact the entire time. I don't want you trying to like hurt yourself. I don't want you pressing back so hard that it's gonna scrape up your shins and your thighs, but I do want contact the entire time on the way up and on the way down. So go back down to the bottom position. Good. Again, so I want you to raise up your hips about 1 inch right there. That's where I want you to stop. Good. So from here, I'm gonna have you deadlift and deadlift. Not bad. Okay, so watch me real quick. So when you're deadlifting, that bar is going around your knees. So we're gonna work on that here for just a second. So go back to the setup position. Good. So as you stand up here, Brian, raise your hips up about 1 inch, right there, stop. As you stand up, I want you to press your knees back against this PVC pipe and deadlift. Press, press, press. That's a straighter bar path. That's what I want you to think about as you do this next rep. So now, pretend I'm still back there with that PVC pipe. Press those knees back or think about pushing your chest away from the floor with your legs. Okay, go back to the setup position. Hips up just a little bit more. Right there, good. Now, weight at the ball of the foot too. Yep, that's the position I want you right there. And deadlift, push the knees back, 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 back. That's a straight bar path. Nice job, dude, much better. Now, on the way down, same thing. I need to have that straight bar path on the way down to that return position where the barbell would be on the floor, okay? So we're gonna start from here and we're gonna work our way down and back down, hips back, get those knees back, push the knees back, good. And finish right there, good, and go ahead and stand up. So I want you to think about, it's okay if your shoulders are forward of the bar. I don't need to be right on top of the bar in this position. So as you kind of return the bar back down to the floor, think of it, it's almost like a bow, right? It's okay if my shoulders are way out in front because I'm gonna squat it back down to the floor anyway, okay? So we're gonna start from the top position and then just bring that bar to the top of the knee, right there. So you see, this is now shoulder out in front of the bar. That's where I want because now your knees are out of the way in that position. So pull them back even more, just a little bit. Good. Now, in that position where your knee is, get a little weight at the ball of your foot. So rock forward just a little bit, right there. Good. And return back down to mid-shin. Nice. Same thing on the way back up and stand. Nice, much better getting the knee out of the way. This is gonna be much more efficient for a clean, snatch, everything. Now I wanna make sure we have that return nice and dialed in. So hips back, get those shoulders out in front, there you go. So now you're pushing the hips back and stand, same thing. Much better. Okay, so as far as how much pressure do you want with your hands back there, I would want enough that I can turn my palms forward and keep the bar on my shin the entire time. So I don't want to be like jamming it back towards my shin, just enough, right? And then as I stand up, I'm keeping my arms nice and long, pressing them gently back towards my shins. So yeah, that's the amount of pressure that I want. You should kind of feel that in your lats here, which is right below your shoulders right there. Go ahead and grab the bar, full grip, little weight at the ball of the foot, good adjustment there with the hip height, and deadlift. Nice job getting the knees out of the way. Stop right there, good. So get some weight at the ball of the foot. That's the shift that I want, pull the knees back, right there. Now keep going, nice job. Good, and deadlift. Nice job, and back down. Knees out of the way, knees out of the way, knees out of the way, knees out of the way. That a boy. Nice job, Brian, good, and stand. Nice job. So we continue working on that. This will become obviously more complex as we change from a deadlift to maybe a clean or a snatch. But again, all the mechanics there are the same. We got a little bit straighter bar path as we were working through that, which again, we're just trying to maximize efficiency as much as possible. So nice job, dude. Cool.
Thanks. Thank you for watching, and if you found that helpful and you want more of this kind of content, we have literally hundreds of videos just like this, from practical tips and tricks to theory to everything in between, all in the knowledge. And if you want to learn from me directly and our cohort of level 4 staff members, then we also have the Knowledge Pro, which we do weekly calls and live interaction and homework and everything else in between. If you want any more information or would like to have a free trial of the knowledge, please click the link in the description below and get after it.